All right, we are live. So I'm going to go ahead to share my screen and we can begin the community call for the month of April. All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today in our monthly community call. This is the community call for the month of April, and the month just started, by the way. I've been enjoying the month so far. How have you been enjoying the month, Joseph?
Oh, it's going great, man. It's my first couple of weeks at AppSmith. I'm loving it.
Awesome, awesome. So today we have a couple of exciting features to show you, and we're going to be demoing all of these features in today's community call. I noticed that my slide actually it's gone away. My slide actually had some elements highlighted, so that was from my mouse, but now this looks good. So we'll be showing you all of the exciting features that we have on board today, and we would like to know what you think. So as we go ahead showing you all of these features, let us know what you think. If you have suggestions for us to make these features better, please do share it. And we highly encourage you to check all of these features that we would be talking about today, because every single one of them is live right now on the product. So we will be getting started soon, but I'm just going to quickly add in here that today's community call will be hands-on, which means we'll be showing you all of these features on the editor. So please follow along with us as we go ahead walking through these features, and feel free to ask questions in the chat. I have the chat opened and I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions or comments, please feel free to share them along as we walk through these features. We would really appreciate your comments. And by the way, if you're just joining us, please also say hello in the chat. We would love to meet you. Yeah, let us know where you're joining in from and what time it is where you are. I'm joining in from Lagos, Nigeria, and right now it's 6 p.m. How about you, Joseph?
Yeah, I'm in Tallahassee, Florida. It's 1 p.m. here.
All right, cool. So I believe we can get started. But before that, we'd like you to meet our awesome host. You have Confidence, which is me. You probably have met me. And we have Joseph joining us today. Welcome to the show, Joseph.
Thanks, Confidence.
Awesome. So these are the features we would be going through today. We have a couple of them. We have about 5 features to walk through today. The first being how to run JavaScript on page loads. This has lots of numerous use cases, especially when it comes to initializing your application and doing a lot of cool stuff. So we'll be showing you how to use this feature in today's community call. We also have a new feature on using the JSON Form widget, which would greatly simplify the process of creating forms on AppSmith. Then we have using JS in the IconButton widget, which I would be showing. We also have the smart basin substitution feature for MongoDB, which makes it easy to write queries, especially in cases where you're creating dynamic queries with MongoDB. I'll be showing you this shortly. And lastly, we have the keyboard shortcuts feature, which I think it's my personal favorite on this list. So we'll be walking you through all of these features in today's call. Let us know what you think, and also feel free to share a message on the chat. All right, so let's get started. And I'd like to get started by talking about a couple of the features we saw on the screen earlier. So the first I'm going to be showing you is how to use JavaScript in the icon of an IconButton widget. So let me just quickly drag in an IconButton widget so that I show you what this feature actually does. So we have an IconButton widget here. I'm going to place it here. And if you notice, the first property here, which is the actual icon property that lets you select the icon for the widget, you notice right now that in addition with the drop down, that you can easily pick an icon from the UI using the drop down, you also have this JS button here, which makes it possible for you to write JavaScript to update the icon of the IconButton widget. And this is really cool because it makes it possible to do a lot of cool stuff with the IconButton widget. So for example, you can write some JavaScript that pulls in the icon from a different widget. Say, for example, I'm just going to type this in, which would be a string here. So let's say random, for example, and that sets the icon of the icon button widget. So to show you how this would be used in a real application, I have an icon button widget already designed to do that. There's an icon button widget here, as you can see. And for the icon property, we actually reading this from the dropdown. So we have a select dropdown here, and whatever icon is selected on the dropdown actually gets that value gets used to render the actual icon of the icon button widget. So for example, I can go select a different icon, for example, so let's say plus, and you can see that this is updated to plus. So let's go select something like the random icon. Both the icon changes as well as the color changes. And I'm just going to show you one more, which is the download icon, which also similarly updates the icon of the icon button widget. So the reason why this is powerful is because we've always allowed users to customize the look of the icon button widget, which means you can go change the button color, for example. You saw earlier as I was switching through the icons, the background color of the button actually changes. You could always do that. And you could also always update the behavior of the icon button widget. So for example, for this icon button widget, here I have plus selected. I can click on the plus button, for example, and this opens up a modal, right? So let's go into open up something different. So let's go to the random icon, for example. And if I click on this, this shows a random quote. So I can go click on it one more time and you see something entirely different show up, which is a random quote coming from a different API. And same also goes for the download button here. If I click on this, this actually tries to download a file. Okay, I think I don't have this enabled. Oh, okay, it's showing up. It's showing up right here. So I think, oh, you can't see this on the screen share, but I'm actually able to download a file using the button configured the way it is. So the reason why this is powerful is because you can now not only change the behavior of the icon button, but also change the looks of it entirely to match the new behaviors you're seeing. So I have this JavaScript function. Let's go open it up. So I have the my functions JavaScript file, and this do stuff function actually powers all of the behavior you saw earlier for the icon button widget. So not only are you able to manipulate the function or the behavior of the icon button widget, but now you can also update the style, edit it, make it look nice, and also make the icons match the expected behavior so that you give your users a seamless experience. Just by looking at the icon, they know what this does exactly. So that's why I think this is really powerful. Joseph, what do you think?
Oh, it's awesome, man. I think it's going to be great for saving space on the layout, like especially in a table row where you might want 2 or 3 different buttons, but maybe they're hidden at different times, right? So instead of having 3 side by side, always taking up room, they can just be one button that changes and it shows what's needed at the time, you know? Like it could be a plus button to add a row, and then once there is a row, you know, a new table, like, or if it's missing a value, it can just look at the rest of the data and dynamically change and fit that data.
Yes, yes, that really makes sense. In some cases, you might actually want to let the users know that an icon is enabled or disabled. And one great way to do it is by updating the state of the icon. So I can remember while I was speaking with you earlier, you gave this cool use case of having a switch toggle the state of an icon button. So I can quickly grab a switch widget, for example. So this is a switch widget. I'm just going to drop this right here. And let's bring in a new icon button. All right, so here I have the switch turned on, and when the switch is turned on, probably I want to do something like show the plus icon. If not, I want it to be disabled. So I can do something like switch one dot is switched on. I can do this check. If it's switched on, let's return the plus icon. Else, I can return the disabled icon. All right, so it's switched on right now. So if I turn this off, this should be disabled. Let's see. Oh, this is disable, not disabled. So this is disable, and here I have
There
the
it is.
disabled icon. Same also goes for the actual disabled state. I can link this with the switch we have there. So we can do something like switch one dot is switched on, and I'm just going to toggle this so that you have the actual disabled state. So if I go turn on the switch, for example, I have both the button enabled and the icon of the button updated, which I think is really cool because this is more intuitive than just having a gray button. If I turn this off, I see the icon is gray and the button background is also gray. So I think this is a cool use case for being able to update the icon of an icon button with JavaScript. All right. So if you have any questions on this, please feel free to post something in the chat. We're taking a look at the chat right now to see if you have any questions. So with that, I think I can move on to the next feature I wanted to show. And that's the smart basin substitution for MongoDB. So what I have right here is a simple application that that pulls in sales data from MongoDB. So I have a table here showing a couple of sales record, and I can go click on a record, for example, to see the product that was sold on that particular day. So you have a sales collection, and each sale record has associated products. So I can click on this, preview the product that was sold and see all of the details of that particular product. And I can go click on the different dates, see the amount of items sold, and see the product sold on that particular day, for example. So the the place where the smart basin substitution comes in is while writing the query to go pull the product. So I have this query here to go find products, and it's a simple query that goes to the database to grab the products given the ID selected from the sales table. So it's an actual simple query here. Why this is powerful is because you, in some cases, while building out your applications, you would sometimes need to build up these queries with JavaScript. So as you can see, as I have here right now, I do not actually have the static query typed into the query editor for the get products query. I'm actually pulling this from a JavaScript function, and that returns a string that is used to make the call in the database. So let's go to see what I have here in the function. So I have two functions here, the find product one function and also the find products two function. And what each of these functions do is that it returns a structure for a query. So I can run each of these, and you can see that this returns the ID of the product selected on the table. And then we can take this information to go run the query. Same also goes for find product to query. This returns the ID similarly, and we can use this to go run the query. But if you notice, these two queries are actually different because of the way the string is constructed. You can see the code right here, but running this here, you can see that the object ID is included in the strings for the find products two function, but find product one function actually have this used as a basin method. So these are two separate or two different queries, but I'm able to use both of them in the same get products query because we have this feature called smart basin substitution. So it makes it really easy when you're concatenating strings together to form MongoDB queries so that you do not run into errors while you allow AppSmith safely escape the string through which you are building these queries. So even though I have two different queries, I can go here and swap them out, for example, and you can still see that we have the products coming back and we don't have errors showing up. So I can switch this to find products two, for example, and run this, and I have the same products coming back. So this functionality is turned on by default whenever you create a MongoDB query. So you don't have to worry about going to the settings pane and having this turned on. It's turned on by default. We just wanted you to be aware that this is now a feature on AppSmith, which makes it really easy for you to build out dynamic queries. And I should also add that this also works with other built-in functions like ISO dates. You already saw the object ID one, which we demonstrated with the sales and products collection. You also have the number long, you have the number decimal, and you have the timestamp added to this. So you actually have various functions for which this is supported. All right, so let's move on to the last feature I'll be demoing before I hand it over to Joseph, which is the keyboard shortcuts feature. And like I said, I think this is my personal favorite feature. Let me tell you why I really love this. So I'm just going to do a quick Google search, which I did the last time when I demoed this feature. So this search says, how much time will I save if I learned keyboard shortcuts? And you can see that the estimate is 8 days per year, which is actually a lot of time. It's like adding an extra week to your year if you choose to learn this keyboard shortcuts. And because we know how much you save when it comes to productivity, or how productive you are when you use keyboard shortcuts, we've actually taken the time to invest in building keyboard shortcuts right into AppSmith. The same way you have keyboard shortcuts on your on your locally installed IDEs, you also have them right here on AppSmith. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple of the new keyboard shortcuts we have, and let's jump into it. So right here, the first I'll be showing you is how to create entities, and you can easily do that by hitting Command plus or Command Shift equal to. So this is Command Shift equal to or Command plus, and this opens up the pane that makes it easy for you to create entities. So I can go create a new JavaScript file from here, for example, and here I have the JavaScript file created. I can navigate back to the table I was working on by hitting Command P or Control P, and here I can see I have the table here on the keyboard shortcuts page. So I can head back to the table, and then we have the table opened up. And this makes it easy to create multiple data sources, because by hitting Command plus or Control plus, I can go create a new data source, for example, or I can scroll through to use any of the connected data sources I already have linked to my application or linked to the organization I'm currently working on. So I can easily do stuff, pull in queries, and build out my application. I'm going to add here that one other area which we are working on to make it possible to edit quickly with keyboard shortcuts is the property pane. So here I have the table widget opened up. As you can see, I have the properties of the table widget opened up. Now it's actually possible for you to edit all of these properties using your keyboard, which means you don't have to use the mouse to scroll around or navigate through editing the widgets. So I can tab through this, for example, hit on enter and go update a step, for example, say step 10. I can click on the escape key to go out and then keep tabbing to edit other properties. So here I have steps, for example, so I can make this. Oh, you can't see this. Oh, so I have to scroll up a bit so that you can see this, because we have the images blocking it. All right, so I think this is visible. So here I have steps. I can see tasks, for example, and we have statuses and actions. And this also works with the drop downs. So here is the drop down to select a primary key column. And what I can do is just use the arrow keys to select what column I want to be set as the primary key, hit enter, and then I can go on editing. So this makes it really easy to edit the properties of a widget just using your keyboard. Joseph, what do you think about this feature?
It's awesome, man. I gotta get used to using them, because I use keyboard shortcuts a ton when it's a native installed app. And I'm just used to using it because it's right there in the menu. It shows what everything's linked to. But I haven't done much with it in AppSmith yet, so I guess I gotta catch up and learn all the shortcuts, because it really does save some time when you get used to it. I do it in other platforms, and yeah, it's time to learn them here, and so I can start working as fast as you.
Yes, yes, it's something I feel everyone should learn. One cool hack to see all of the supported keyboard shortcuts is pressing command question mark or command shift forward slash or control question mark. So this is command question mark. I think this is not working for me.
Does it come up in a new window maybe? Because we're only seeing the one window.
Yeah. Okay, I'm on Firefox, and I think this key is mapped to something different on Firefox. But if you use a Chrome-based browser, which I use most of the time, hitting Control or Command question mark actually brings up a modal that shows you all of the supported keyboard shortcuts on AppSmith. All right, so this has been using keyboard shortcuts. I'm sure all of you will go try this out to boost your productivity. All right, so we have a couple of other features to take a look at. And Joseph, do you mind sharing your screen to walk us through those features?
Yeah, all right. Let me know when you guys can see this. All right.
Yeah, I can see the screen now.
Okay, so the first feature we have is on-page load JavaScript. And let me show you the old approach. Let's say you've got a data source that's being updated by some external system. It's not AppSmith. So AppSmith has to check for updates. And every time the user wants to see if there's new data, they would have to click a button to trigger that API. They could refresh the whole page too if you've got it set to run on page load, but they still have to click, you know? So let's say we had some new entries made to this data source and the user refreshes. We can have everything repopulate and chart everything, but they keep having to click. So the new on-page load function, this lets us run a set interval. So I'm going to set an interval when the page first loads and tell it to run the chart data.run. So it'll call and get the data from the chart sheet here every 5 seconds. And it sets this interval when the page first loads. But then now that it's set every 5 seconds, it will keep refreshing the data. So I didn't have this turned on at first. I'm going to enable this on page load, and then let's redeploy and check out the app. So it's refreshing every 5 seconds, and there is like a flash. You'll see it here when the timestamp is reset, but I've got it turned off on the data for the table and the charts. If you want to see that refresh, there's an option to turn it on. So let's update the sheet again. And then the next time this refreshes, it pulls in the new data. So you could maybe have this set as a dashboard on like a display or a kiosk, and it wouldn't need anything else. The first time the page opens, it's just going to start refreshing.
Yeah, this makes sense. I was just wondering, can you show me how to stop the animation? Because we've actually had a lot of questions from users who have requested they would like to see how to turn off those animations, the flashing.
Right. Yep. I've already got it turned off. The animate loading. So let's just turn on a couple of those so we can see, and I'll leave one off so we see the difference.
Okay.
So now every 5 seconds, everything was refreshing, but it was suppressing that flash. And so I just turned it on for these two.
Yeah, I can see it now.
All right. Cool. So that's the on-page load. There's tons of use cases for it. This is kind of a simple one, but a more advanced one would be, let's say you've got an API that requires authentication, and you've got to get a refresh token and then take that and use the access token on all of your subsequent API calls. And you can have a single API run on page load. But if you need to chain a bunch together, maybe you want to get the refresh token and then embed that access token in the next one so that you can also load up the products or the users or whatever it is. You couldn't go straight to running get users or get products on something that needed a token to be populated from a previous call first. You could only put one API on to load on page load, and then those ones that were dependent on it would have to wait for that to get its value. So now that we can chain things together and have async await functions that trigger on page load, you could write out a function. I've actually done this at another app, and I've got it set up to where as soon as the page loads, it gets the refresh token, inserts that, and then it populates like 3 different tables that it's not able to do on page load without that token. So it's kind of chaining together those steps and saves the user some extra clicks and refreshing.
Yeah, and I was also thinking when it comes to authentication, one of that cool feature that could be implemented is checking if the user has a valid token when the app starts up before making any other call to the API. So probably you have that token cached to the local store. You can pull that out from the store, perform the check, and if the user has a valid token, then you can display the UI of the app. Else, you can navigate to a new login page so that the user can refresh the session and start up the login process again.
Sure. Yep. Your custom JavaScript could have a navigate to in here and some logic to decide which page to send them to and look to see if a token's expired. So you have total control over setting up all of those interactions and taking the user to a different page depending on the state of a token or whatever it is.
I just saw a question from the chat. Although this is based on the keyboard shortcuts I was showing earlier. So the question says, I saw create Supabase query with the shortcuts you just showed us. Can we use this auth method in Supabase? Okay, so I already had Supabase created. I already had Supabase connected to the application. And that's why when I was using the keyboard shortcuts, the prompt was to create a new query. So this is the same way you already have MongoDB connected rather. And from the connection, you can create queries to talk to your MongoDB backend. So if you have Supabase connected using the Postgres connector, you can easily do this.
Right. Yeah. It'll have to be an existing data source that you've already authorized down here. And then you end up getting those ones as suggestions to quickly create a new query or API.
Yeah. There's this comment from MS DOS says, I'd love to see animate loading be defaulted to off. Okay, this sounds cool. In some cases, especially if you do not have set interval turned on, you may actually need to see those animations so that you know the app is actually making a request, right? Joseph, what do you think?
I think it's good to have some type of indication, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a flash. So I'm embedding right here the response meta from the chart data. So I call the Google Sheets to get this chart data. And in the response meta, there's a header called date. And that tells me that at what time this API was last run. So I think you need some kind of indication for the user, but this works too. It doesn't have to be a flash, just a timestamp, or you could maybe even use that icon button and just flash the color of that, like a little circle arrow refreshing. And we've got the circular progress widget, which I think there's a feature that's not released yet, but you'll be able to show an infinite loading state. So instead of that circular progress being stuck at like 70 or whatever percent it's tied to, it'll just be looping while it's in the infinite state. And then when your process is done running, then you can set it to a fixed value.
Yes, that would also work. Yeah. All right, so I think we can move on.
All right, cool. So that's the on-page load. And the next section we have here is JSON Forms. This is awesome. It just came out. I'm still kind of learning my way around it, but it's really cool and saves you a ton of work. So first I'm going to show you the old way. Before, your form was one widget. So here's form 1, and it's got some properties, but the fields aren't part of the form. The form is just a container, and that's its own widget. These buttons are a separate widget, and every field, like any field that you want to put in here, you got to drag them in one at a time, and then set its properties. So it definitely slows you down, especially on a big table with lots of fields. It's just a lot of dragging each one in and getting them all sized and where you want it. So now with JSON forms, you can take a data source, and I've got the get users data in this table. And this form that's over here, I didn't have to build it all one at a time. So this JSON form widget, let's check out the data. The source data for this is table 1, selected row. So when I select a different row, I'm changing the input data for this form, and it populates all of the initial values of the form from that row. And it just created this entire form when I gave it a data set. So as the data changes, it adds new columns. Like if I were to rename the user, let's do name 2, and then we refresh the app. The next time that form is created off of the data set, it's going to read that value. There it is, name 2.
Name 2.
And another thing it's doing, it looks at the casing and the underscores and the spacing, and it creates a more visual, user-friendly name. So it's title case with spacing. And here, I don't have a space. I don't have an underscore. It's, username gets turned into 2 words with no underscore and title case. So it's just saving you a lot of time on generating the form, the labels. Let me put this back because I don't want to throw off something I have built in the next section.
I was just wondering, is it possible to edit some of these generated titles?
Yeah, so it saves you the work of starting all of it, but then you can go in and customize everything. So like the ID field here, it's called ID, because it came from the table there. But if you wanted to change stuff, you can overwrite that. You can change the display of it, and then you can go into the settings and change what type it is. Make this a number input. So
yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, so it just saves you a ton of setup time. And then a really cool thing, let me reset this, is that you can check the state of these and disable the form if something's invalid. So I'm going to set the ID. Actually, I want to do this. Let me do this on the next example. Let's go to the next tab. So on this one, I'm taking the data from the selected row, and I've got this form here, and the ID is required. If I take the ID out of here, so the individual field gives the user a visual indication that it is invalid. It also gives us, as a developer, this field state is valid. So if you look at JSON Form 3.field state, then for each field, there's in this object here, you can see, is that field currently set to be disabled or required or valid? And each one of these true false conditions here, those relate back to something that can have its own expression. So to figure out if the ID is valid, is it just required to have any kind of value, or does it need to be unique, or a certain string or number? Whatever your expression here is, you don't have to reference it there. You can just get a simple true false. So it's really cool. And you can see the submit button here is grayed out because there is an option here to disable the form from being, I'm in a single field. So I'm in the widget for the form, but I'm in a single field. So I'm in backup. And you can disable the form when it's invalid. And so when I turn that off, I could bypass it and send bad data, but the default is that if something's invalid, it's going to prevent that from being submitted.
Yes. I was just taking a look at the chat, and I can see that we are getting lots of love for this feature. It really makes it easy to build forms, because I build a lot of forms, especially to update stuff on tables, and it takes a lot of time to make sure all of the inputs are in the right place, to make sure they are perfectly aligned, to make sure that they are initialized with the right data, and also to read all of that data out correctly, because now you have to reference a lot of fields, a lot of different widgets. So this makes it so much easy to build forms.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to building the response to send this off. So if I add some text here, you'll see it in the form data, but the source that generated this form is the selected row. Now that has not changed yet. That's the source data, but in the form data, you can see the extra text here. So when we want to send this and submit it, the update request for it, I'm on form 3, and so you don't have to type out the entire JSON body of your row data to send for an update. Normally you would start out typing the JSON object, okay, name equals selected row dot this, or form input one dot, you would have to manually build all that and create your response. So now you just say, send JSON form 3's form data, and that sends the draft version that's only on the client side. So they're still building up this data set, and when I submit it, it's going to send that over here, and now I just updated it in the data source, and on the submit, you can tell it to get users after it updates. So first take the form 3's data and send that as an update, and then get users to repopulate the table and the source data. It's really cool, man. It saves you so much setup work. You just point this form to a data source and it generates all the fields, and then a single reference to that entire form gives you all the data to send your update. Really cool.
Yeah, this is so much easy because you're just writing one binding here to pull all of that data from the form. This is so much easier to work with.
Oh yeah. So there's more. It's got some really cool things you can do with it. The next thing here is you can type some plain text, and let me show this one in the live app instead of the editor.
Before moving ahead, we have a question here. So we have a question from S. It says, so if we add a new column in Google Sheets, is it going to appear? Can we lock the JSON form? So is it possible to lock Okay. Please show us how to do that.
Okay, so on a form, there's this auto-generate, which can either be an on-off, or you can use JavaScript to determine when it should auto-generate. So if it is on, if this auto-generates on, then every time the page refreshes, or you reset this widget, or the underlying data changes, anything like that will regenerate the form if that's on. And then when you turn it off, all those things can change, but the form won't regenerate until you tell it to. So you could do it manually here as needed, and the data could change or the column structure, but it wouldn't update until you tell it to. If you have the auto generate turned off, and then you see, well, when it's off, it enables the manual option to regenerate as needed.
Yeah, this makes sense, especially in cases where you're using data from a database like MongoDB, where some fields can be null, or you actually don't have those fields on certain records in the database, and yet you want to be able to create those fields. So it makes sense to be able to lock the form to make sure you have consistent inputs across records.
Exactly. All right, so the next thing here is you can build a JSON form, not just from like API response data, but from just raw text. Just type up your own structure of whatever you want to call something, and it's going to generate an entire form with, fields, drop downs, number, whatever the data type is. And it's creating this on the fly from you just typing. It's really cool. And it looks at the data and changes the type. So like right here, name, it's got a number input, but if I put quotes around this, now the little number arrows went away because it sees that it's a string. So it doesn't just make an input for each property. It looks at the values and the type of data and gives you the right type of input.
Yeah, so this is basically JSON to form. You can have someone design the structure of the form using JSON, save it to the database, and read that structure out from the database to actually generate a form, depending on the user who is coming to use the application. So this is really cool. You can actually do some form automation using this feature.
Sure. Yeah. The form can be different for every user, or whatever other condition you want to compare it to. Call an API and then based on that value, enable certain fields, or change which the branching logic or what happens when you click submit. I mean, there's tons of possibilities. And this text doesn't have to be a single field that you manually typed. It could be the output of a custom function. Like maybe you look at a couple different inputs, run that through a JS object, and then have it spit out the right format to create a custom form. And it really just opens up tons of possibilities. You can structure it however you want, pull in data from multiple data sources and make a new structure, and then build a form that merges those two. So
yeah, it's actually reminded me. I was watching something a while back and built. I built a system that makes it possible to have custom inputs using the JSON form. Do you mind me sharing my screen and showing this?
Sure. Yeah, let's check it out.
Okay, so sharing my screen. All right, so I'm going to edit the application so that we have it open. Okay, so what I have right here is a system that makes it possible to have dynamic inputs, and it's an illustration that shows you how easy it is to create these inputs using the JSON form widget. So I have two buttons here. I have the plus and the minus button, and what these buttons do is that they increment a number saved into the store. So I have a number, and each time you click on the plus button, you actually go to increment that number. Same also goes for the minus button. You decrement that number whenever the button is clicked on. Then what actually happens is that on the JavaScript side, I'm going to open up the JavaScript file. I take that number that is saved in the store and I generate an object with items inside of it based on the number of numbers saved in the store. So let me just show you what I mean here. I have this create field function, and if I run this, I actually have nothing created. So let's head back to the form. And here we just have two inputs. Now, if I head back here and try to run the create field function, you see that we have two inputs. And based on the amount of inputs, the JSON form widget looks at that JSON data and generates inputs based on the JSON we are generating. So we can add more to it, for example. So now we have 5 inputs, and you can see all of this here. And I can also go reduce it by decreasing or decrementing the number of nums saved in the absent store, as you can see from the onClick event here. So I think this makes it easy to create forms in places where users may want to provide multiple inputs. So you can have a little button to the side that says add new field, and when the user clicks on that button, they have more inputs to type in data. So I think this is a cool use case for this.
Yeah, it's really cool because the types of fields that you can add are not like restricted to just showing and hiding and having to set it up ahead of time. Like you can add a new field and make it a certain type. And if you were doing this in another form builder, maybe you'd have to add 3 or 4 different fields for different types and then conditionally show and hide, but with this, it's just on the fly, add a new field as you need it.
Yeah. We have a question from S. Says, can we move the components in the form or add styles to the elements?
Not yet. You can change the drop-down type, like for each input, change it to a select or a text or a number, and you can change the label. You can name it something new, but I don't think we can reposition them yet or resize them. I'm not sure if that's coming or not, but it saves you so much time. It's really a big upgrade from what we had before. And if you need more control over the layout, then you can always use the old method and build them each, one at a time.
Yes. We have this question. Where is the best place from Paul? So Paul asks, where is the best place to learn all the ins and outs of the JSON form widget?
Yeah, so it just launched. The feature came out, I think, yesterday, and the blog for it launched today. So there's a new blog post. It should be posted in the Discord and maybe on our forums. So there's a post that goes with it. There's the docs, and we'll be putting out some samples that show different use cases. So it just launched, and there'll be more stuff getting released to help explain how to use it. confidence when we're done, can we add the links to the docs for these to
Oh
the
yeah,
post? Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So I'm just putting the link to the docs right here on the chat, and that's a great place to get started.
Cool. So I have one more section there on the forms. If we can switch back.
All right. Go ahead to share your screen.
All right. Okay, so the last thing in here I wanted to show, it's really cool, man. You can add new fields to a form that was auto-generated. So this, let me get to this tab here. This form was generated off a table 2 selected row. And so I select a row, it looks at that data, generates a form. But on top of that, you can add your own custom fields. So I've already added a couple. Go ahead and add a new one just so you can see what it's like. So I've added this custom field, and then I go into it to tell it what type. Now you can start collecting extra data from the user on top of whatever it was that created this form. You know, there's one row of a table here that define this form, but maybe you want to capture some extra data from the user. And so there's all these different options to create new field types. And the really cool ones that I wanted to show, that's the new one I just started, but the array and the object type. So first I'm going to do the object. It's a note object that's got 3 different fields in it. And let's see, here it is. So this field that I added, its field type is an object. It's so its properties is notes, and that's kind of this outer square that you see around these 3 fields that are grouped together. So that's my notes object. And then down here, the field configuration for it, you can add as many fields as you want on this note. So it's like a separate object with all these, a new level of fields basically. And so you could have like a delivery order where you want to send some a note to the kitchen, like extra cheese, and then delivery, you know, wherever they need to pick it up at. And so that's an object with multiple fields.
Yeah.
Then you can have an array. This is really cool, man. You can have like multiple fields and just let them keep adding a whole new set. So inside of each one of these, you've got different options. And then, you know, topping 2, I want on the second half here, and they can just keep adding more. And as I'm doing that, it's building up and appending the selected row data source. So the input to the form is a selected row. The form data is the selected row with the modifications from the user and some whole new data that we just made up on the fly. Like, I love that. It's so powerful. There's a lot of stuff we'll be able to do with this, and then nesting these and conditionally showing and hiding the options here to add new ones. I mean, yeah, I'm just starting to breach the surface of what I can do with this.
Oh yes. Yes, this actually makes it possible to also have nested forms. So based on a user selection previously, you can on the fly generate new inputs right within that form and show the user as a separate segment of things to configure, like you're showing with the pizza order here you have on the form.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm super excited about this one, man, especially the array and the object type.
Awesome. Thank you for showing us all of that. So I think we have about 10 minutes to take any questions that we missed. So if you have those questions, please keep them rolling in the chat. We have our eyes on the chat. I think I can just make the chat overlaid here. So we'll be able to see any new questions you send in. Okay, so I think there's a question here from S. He asks, would it be possible to create select elements on the JSON form? You have numbers, you have text inputs. Is it also possible to create drop downs or selects?
Yes, you can. So on the form widget where you're adding whole new fields, in addition to the data that it's connected to, you can just add new fields, and they can also be a select or a multi-select. I think there might be one bug on the select, like populating there, fixing today, but it is there. There is an option to use a select as well. If you have an issue with it and it's like not populated or something, they're aware of it, and that should be fixed really soon.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, so I'm just scrolling through previous comments, trying to check if there's anyone we missed.
It looks like they're as excited about the JSON forms as I am. We got a lot of people here.
Oh yeah, yes. It's a really big feature because it makes it so much easier to create forms.
Yeah, so we just got a question from Paul there. Can you show that one?
Okay, so it says, you can see this, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So
yeah,
it says,
is there something different that we have to do to add forms, or can you use the same form for adding and updating? No, you don't have to do anything different. So if you want to add a record, you could populate that from a blank record, because right now when I select the row, it was filling in all the values too. It's not just taking the properties for names, but it was populating it with the values. So if you wanted a way to use that exact same form for your blanks, a couple ways you could do it. You could like copy a completed record and just clear out all the values and make that the default, or maybe have a switch for like add, use. If you want to add on that form, then bind it to data from a blank object. It's got all the property names, but no values. And then that would generate a form that's blank. And then you could maybe have a switch statement that says, or a ternary operator or whatever. And if they want to do an update, then go off the selected row. If they want to do an add, then go off of this other JSON that's exact same structure, but all the values are blank.
Yes, so it's possible for you to have forms to create new items just from the JSON structure.
Right.
So we have a new question from Seed. The labels are coming from another endpoint keys and values from another endpoint values. Can we create a JSON form with combining those?
Yeah, sure. You could map over both the data sets. So if you've got an array from the keys from one endpoint, and then the values that you want to use for the values are from another endpoint, you could map over one, and in the loop, in each level of the map, find the match from the other data set, and then build an object of label equals this, key equals that, and then go to the next one. And so you're going to do a loop, and in each step of that mapping loop, you would do like a filter maybe to find where a key equals value, and then take the first one that comes out of that. Or find would work, find or filter.
Cool. We don't have any new questions, so I'm just going to scroll back up. Okay, we have a new question now. Can we have JS condition in the form structure?
A condition in the form structure.
I haven't checked. Okay, so probably I share my screen and just show you as I check. Let's hide the chat over there. So one thing I know you can do.
Oh, I see what he's asking. Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing I know you can do for sure is paste in the structure just like this, and it should work fine. Yeah, this works fine. And here you can go into write JavaScript, for example. So appsmith.user.email, for example, and that's going to prefill it with my email. So yes, you can have JavaScript here using the curly braces or mustache syntax.
Mm-hmm. And you could also have JavaScript be the entire source data, where it says, if this condition, use this data source. If some other condition, then use this API. And then the same one form can change based on some condition, and the underlying data swaps out and repopulates the form from a totally different endpoint.
Yes, that would also work. Okay, so let's see if we have any questions. Okay, we had Phil joining us from Canada. Seeing his intro message here. Hello, Phil. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. This was really cool to see how many people joined and are excited about all the new features.
Yeah, so if we do not have any more questions, I think we can call it a day here. What do you think, Joseph?
Yeah, I think this is good. Let's put those links on this when we're done. I know you got it in the chat, but let's when we get the video posted, the JSON Form docs, and if anyone has more questions on it, we'll add that.
Yes, I'll definitely do that. And I think S also asked if it's possible to get the templates of the applications we demoed, especially the
Sure.
JSON Form app you built. So
yeah,
we can also add the link to the chat.
Okay, cool. Yep, we'll share the demo apps with it too.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.